How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to be reacting to should the Dutch blackpete tradition be abolished? I recently did a blackpete video prior to this, and it got a lot of feedback. And I don't think the video that I watched was as accurate as it should have been. It is a lot more of a complex story than a lot of us realize. And so I really just wanted to give a second look to see what more there is to know about this. First video really made it sound like it was a racist thing. And I truly believe, it was started out not to be a racist thing. Back in the day when they actually had the blackpete thing, there wasn't much black people that lived in the Netherlands. And of course, later on it becomes a racist thing. So we're going to check this out and just see what they have to say. If anybody disagrees or has anything to say about it, please put it in the comments down below. I really appreciate it. And I love the feedback. I love that I've heard so many good stories about this tradition, and people have fantastic memories of this tradition. And then now it's to the point where people's twisting and turning it and making it into something it's not. And hopefully this will be able to give us a little bit of insight of what's going on. So
a controversial Dutch holiday tradition is under scrutiny once again. Blackpete is a delight for some, but a racist symbol for others. So, in a year of Black Lives Matter protests, is it time up for this divisive figure? This is Inside Story.
it's crazy that they have to put the whole Black Lives Matter thing into this. It has nothing to do with race at all.
Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Imran Khan. Many children in the Netherlands have grown up with the image of Blackpete. He's a helper for St. Nicholas, their equivalent of Santa Claus. But Blackpete is highly controversial. That's because the figure is usually a white person wearing black face makeup with exaggerated lips and an afro wig. The tradition dates back to the 19th century, around the time of the global slave trade. Black people say the character is racist and has no place in modern Dutch society. Some cities have replaced Blackpete with a compromise figure called Chimney Pete, whose face is covered in soot instead.
Het is eigenlijk niet meer van deze tijd om.
It's no longer appropriate to.
I said that just straight up just don't make any sense to me, because they're acting like they've changed. They changed it because of the race and stuff. The whole thing was about Blackpete going down the chimney and getting soot on their face anyway. That was what it was all about, and then it's just taken out of context. Let's watch.
Be completely covered with black makeup, so we're using suit. And the suit is because we're going through the chimney. And you're not this year, are you, St. Nicholas?
Dit jaar niet, Sinterklaas.
Ik dit jaar, nee. Ik doe alles vanuit.
No, I'm working from home.
Op
Dat is wel de reden, maar gewoon een beetje aangepast.
We wanted to adapt in order to make it fun for everybody and keep everybody happy.
The controversy intensified earlier this year when Black Lives Matter protests began in the Netherlands. Anti-Blackpete demonstrators often face supporters of the far right. Surveys suggest a majority of Dutch people want to keep the character, but public opinion is shifting. Some libraries recently removed children's books that feature Blackpete. Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who once defended the tradition, now says he's changing his attitudes as well.
En ook daar heb ik zelf ook grote veranderingen doorgemaakt over Zwarte Piet.
The moment I met little children with dark skin who told me they felt incredibly discriminated against because Blackpete is black, that's the last thing you want at a St. Nicholas party. Discriminated against because Blackpete. Little children with dark skin who told me they felt incredibly
Hold on a minute. I'm going to go back just a little bit.
Anti-Black Pete demonstrators often face supporters of the far right.
Too much.
Surveys suggest a majority of Dutch people want to keep the character, but public opinion is shifting. Some libraries recently removed children's books that feature Black Pete. Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who once defended the tradition, now says he's changing his attitudes as well.
En ook daar heb ik zelf ook grote veranderingen doorgemaakt over Zwarte Piet.
The moment I met little children with dark skin who told me they felt incredibly discriminated against because Black Pete is black.
They're making it about a race thing. They are not painting their face to be a black person. They're painting their face to represent the soot that comes from the chimney when they go down. It has nothing to do with if you're black or white at all. And also, like, one video I did watch, there was a black lady in the middle of the crowd of everybody dressed up as Black Pete, and she did not have makeup on. To me, that's racist because it is insinuating that Black Pete is a dark-skinned person. Black Pete is not. He's covered in soot. Like, this makes no sense. It's crazy. The first video that I watched, it sounded racist to me. And then with how much feedback I've got from everybody just, like, really enjoying this tradition and stuff, it's like everybody's ruined it for them and turned it into something it's not. I've read a lot about it, and I'm like, holy cow, like, yeah, if you guys think it's racist, you guys need to go back and watch more videos because, you just made it like that, you know.
That's the last thing you want at a St. Nicholas party. But on the other hand, if the government were to decree that Black Pete is no longer allowed, then a lot of people who love that tradition will react. The tradition is changing over time. In a few years' time, there will be hardly any Black Petes, I expect.
Let's introduce our guests. In Amsterdam, Mitchell Assayas, an activist at the anti-Black Pete movement in Kinshasa. Tracy Bibo-Tansia, a political scientist and activist focusing on gender and race. And in London, Patrick Vernon, a cultural historian. A warm welcome to you all. I wanted to begin in Amsterdam with Mitchell Assayas. Mitchell, this character, Black Pete, is effectively the helper of St. Nicholas. He arrived some point in the 19th century as a helper to St. Nicholas into the Netherlands. At the same time, there's a global slave trade happening. These are all caricatures of what some white people might have thought a black person might look like back then. A grotesque caricature, I'm sure. But this is not just about a cute Christmas tradition. This is almost celebrating slavery, isn't it?
It is.
No.
The tradition was invented in 1850. I'm currently in an archive around Black history, the Black Archives, and here you can see one of the first book in which it was introduced, and it was introduced 13 years before the abolishment of slavery. So that was a time in which people in Europe, in the Netherlands, looked at Black people as inferior beings. So in that context, this caricature was created, and that's why we protest against it.
But it's not just about that anymore, about the fact that the character was created from one space and time. Over the years, it's changed into a Christmas tradition. Many people in the Netherlands have grown up with this. They don't see anything wrong with it. Why is it now causing such controversy?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, when this book was introduced, it became very popular. And it became the most popular tradition in the country, more popular than Christmas. And what you see in the Dutch context is that people believe that it's an innocent tradition, because a lot of people believe that there is no racism in the Netherlands. It's an innocent country. Racism happens in the US, in South Africa, but not here. So that makes it difficult to address the underlying legacy of slavery and colonialism. However, by criticizing the tradition, we've been able to open up a debate about both the tradition and the underlying issue of institutional racism.
But the Prime Minister is saying that actually you're moving far too quickly, too fast. You want to ban this tradition. He says, give it a few years, the tradition will die naturally.
Yeah, but
That makes me sad for the people in the Netherlands because they literally just got a tradition just like wiped out from underneath them. To me, that's really sad because honestly, these three people here.
This isn't the average college student today.
That's strange.
This is. Meet Ashley, a working mom going back to school in hopes of earning her teaching degree.
Sorry, guys.
he's been saying that for a long time, and people have been criticizing.
Okay, so one thing I did not realize when I watched that first video, this guy right here, if he was to put on a wig and red lipstick and go out there to celebrate Black Pete, he would be considered racist. He would have to put black on his face because it's not talking about the skin color. I just don't understand. This really disappoints me because honestly, there's so many videos out that I watch that I'm like, man, it sounds racist, but it's not. It's really not. I don't understand why. I mean, I do understand. It's getting crazy here, and everybody gets offended over everything.
Criticizing this tradition since the 1930s. So I'm asking the question like, how long more should we wait? How much longer should we wait? I think when we talk about human rights, when we talk about racism, we shouldn't phase it out. We should completely end it immediately so everybody can, live in a respectable way and in a way that, people are treated equally.
Let's bring in Patrick Vernon here in London. Patrick, when you and I were growing up in the UK, there was a very famous figure. He was actually called the Gollywog. He was a caricature of a black person that was used for commercial marketing practices on a brand of jam. Eventually, that figure did go away when you and I became older and we started questioning it, and there was a movement to try and get rid of that. Is it the same in the Netherlands, or is this much more cynical, much more openly racist?
It's very similar, to be quite honest. I mean, let's face it. One of the impacts or legacies of enslavement, in terms of the transatlantic slave trade, was a dehumanization of people of African heritage, whether they're in Netherlands, in the UK, in the Caribbean, in North America, South America, etc. And so there's been a long tradition of using images like gollywogs, using caricatures like minstrels, using white people putting shoot polish, pretend to be black. That was very popular also in Britain. We had a well-known TV show on the BBC called The Black and White Minstrel Show, and that was primetime TV in the 70s. And also you have Morris dancers in Cornwall who also blacken up, and there have been campaigns about that. And it's a basic principle. The basic principle is black lives do not matter. It's easy to ridicule, to make caricatures of black people, and if you were to apply that to other communities, people wouldn't tolerate that. We recognise anti-Semitism in Europe.
That mean?
We recognise Islamophobia, but we do not recognise anti-blackness or Afrophobia. And I think it's important that we stamp this out.
Tracy Bieber-Tansia in Kinshasa, I saw you nodding your head there when it came to the idea that we do not recognise the idea of this, blackness of people, that we actually do caricature this much more than, say, anti-Semitism or Islamophobia, for example, the two examples that were brought out. Is that accurate, do you think?
Well, I think it's accurate, especially when people of African descent, black people in Belgium or the Netherlands, try to talk about Black Pete and said it's racism. A lot of people will say, well, what are these people saying? They come here in our countries and they want to change our tradition. That's actually pointing out that people don't see us as Belgian or citizens of the Netherlands. And so, yes, of course, it's an issue. We don't recognize the pain of Black people and people of African descent. But I've seen in the past years there has been some effort, especially on European level, to recognize these pains by writing some resolution and other political statements. So I think we are still not there where people recognize the pain, recognize the struggle and the structural racism Black people and people of African descent in all Europe face. But step by step, we are moving to the right direction.
Mutlaseyas, in Amsterdam, where you are right now, when you talk to people about blackpete and you say to them, look, I don't know whether you are or aren't racist, I don't know you that well, but let me just explain to you that the caricature is racist to me. Do you get a welcome reception? Do people listen?
I have to say, in the city of Amsterdam, there's been some progressive change, but that has been developed through struggle. So over the past 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot of activism and there was a lot of resistance. But in Amsterdam, I'd say there's a level of respect and understanding now. However, outside of the big cities like Amsterdam and Rotterdam, a few weeks ago, for example, in the south of the Netherlands, there was a small protest and peaceful protesters against racism were ambushed by a few hundred hooligans and extreme right people. So you see this gap between the city and the rest of the country. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
But the work to be done needs to take into account tradition, Mitchell. It needs to take into account that there is this tradition that has been going on since the 19th century and that actually, you know what, maybe you are just spoiling Christmas. You are spoiling a festivity by this.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing about
This weird new tool is quickly becoming the most popular Christmas gift of 2022.
Understand why
it combines all the power of a traditional chainsaw into one
are so aggravated about
But
this.
I mean, the thing about traditions is that all traditions change. Culture changes. I mean, it was a tradition that women were not allowed to vote. It was also a tradition to enslave Black people. There are anti-Semitic traditions which have been abolished. So I think people should move forward and acknowledge that everything changes throughout time.
In Kinshasa, Tracy Bibo-Tanzia, is this the right fight to pick when you have structural, systemic racism, when you have violence, where you have people who are denied housing because of the color of their skin, who are denied jobs because of the color of their skin? Is a Christmas character, a festive character, really the fight we should be picking?
First of all, I think that Black people can choose which fight they can pick. I think no one has to tell us or other Black people which fight they can pick. Second of all, people need to understand that living in countries like Belgium or Netherlands and facing racism is a traumatic experience. So yes, it's a right fight to pick because still a lot of kids have to be called blackpete. When you know that everything that is Black, that our Blackness often is associated with negative stereotypes, blackpete is one of them. So it's a fight in a bigger fight, in a fight against structural racism.
That's a good part to posit. The Black Pete character is supposed to be a companion of Saint Nicholas or Santa Claus. Isn't it supposed to be a racist thing? And it's made out to be racist, and it's very, very sad to me. Very sad. That sucks.
In a fight against oppression, systematic oppression of Black people, but it's an important fight. Black people should feel free to celebrate the parties that they want, and also children, especially children, because at the end of the day, it's a children party. If we change blackpete, the children will not care. It's most of the time the adults that make a problem out of it. But all children will be very happy if the stereotype surrounding blackpete change, and it's a more friendly character for everyone.
Patrick Byrne in London, do you think this is the right fight to pick?
I agree with the previous speaker. You know, people are fighting at different levels. Some people are fighting on key issues around stop and search and deaths in custody. Some people are fighting around better mental health care provision. Some people are fighting around housing. Some people are fighting around immigration and migration policy. The interesting thing about the whole stuff around caricatures, it's a national narrative. So when people talk about tradition and it's steeped in historical structural racism, that is part of that tradition. So you might challenge stop and search, but if the police believe that a character like blackpete is acceptable, therefore they will treat with disrespect young black youth when they arrest them, or when you are dealing with state officials, they look at you, oh, that's blackpete, therefore I don't respect you. It's very clear in terms of United Nations declarations and charters over the last 50 years that people of African descent have been traumatized through the history of slavery and modern day racism. And part of the process is decolonizing traditions which reinforce those stereotypes. So whether it's blackpete or minstrels or anything that gives a negative connotation, it has to be acceptable. This has not been tolerated, and we need to get rid of this if we want to have a just, fair, and inclusive society.
Ms. Lysias, one of the things that's really changed over the last year or so is the Black Lives Matters movement. It has introduced a consciousness, not just in Europe, but globally as well. Has it had an impact on your movement, on your...
So, I got that extension to where I wouldn't see ads. So, I will go ahead and do this. I really liked it. Supporters say blackpete is black from coming down the chimney and not a racist character. I agree. This is very disturbing. Only because like there's a lot of information out there that's very inaccurate and very one-sided about this blackpete situation. I mean, do they not know they can't be a blackpete being black? If you guys are from the Netherlands and you've grew up with blackpete, please put down in the comments down below what your thoughts were. I've only I literally, out of all the comments that I got in my first video, there's only a couple ones that they said they were scared of blackpete, which, you know, my mom and I grew up very, you know, I wasn't middle class, I'd say. And my mom would always tell us kids that if we weren't good, we would go across the street to the neighbor's house and she was a witch. It wasn't anything, you know, that would be considered abuse or anything, but little did I know, later on down the road, found out that it was my mom's really good friend. She'd just always go across the street. It wasn't anything, you know, really serious, but, you know, it did scare me as a kid. And, yeah, it is what it is. You know, I'm just gonna push play, guys.
On people understanding.
Yes, absolutely.
Stop. Before you do any holiday shopping this year, you really have to see this. I'm going to show you one simple trick that'll save you a lot of money when you're shopping online.
Crazy.
In fact, I was able to save.
Absolutely. As I said before, in the Dutch context of the past 10 years, the movement against what the was at the forefront forefront of the movement. And it grew from 10 people to about 1,000 last year. However, this summer, more than 50,000 people showed up on the streets, so that had quite a large impact. So we've been invited by the Prime Minister, by the mayors of Amsterdam, Rotterdam, and several institutions to think about policy proposals to combat racism. And to add to the other speakers, I don't think you have to choose between one or the other. In the Dutch context, I think it goes for Belgium as well. The fight against blackpete opens up space for a broader debate about other issues.
This is killing me. Seeing all these Black Lives Matter signs everywhere is a little bit disturbing. They are literally making it out to be a racist thing. It's not racist. I was just looking at, some of the comments that I got from my first video, and somebody said on here, the bad thing is we get looked at as at if we do things wrong, while back in Suriname they still have this holiday. People come to the Netherlands to nag about this stuff while they do it at their home country, but they cannot change it. There are there so they come here and try it here. I'm so sad that they're changing our culture, but we have to respect theirs, which is getting out of hand, and it is. Um, the whole that's a whole nother thing I'm not getting into, but there's just, guys, if you guys want to get the other side of this, go down on my comments on my other blackpete video and see what everybody has to say, because it really made me more sad that it's like everybody's just coming in and tearing down their traditions. Like, people in the Netherlands, like, they are their own people. That is for sure. But nobody should be going in there and trying to change them, because they're actually very intelligent. But
And examples of racism, such as racial profiling, labor market discrimination, discrimination in education, etc., etc. So it all adds to the broader movement of progressive change.
Patrick Vernon in London, I just want to talk to you about how you change things legislatively through lawmaking. In the UK, we have the Race Relations Act. It's not perfect, but a lot of people have suggested that it has changed things for the better for coloured communities in the UK. Do you think that's true? Do you think it is lawmaking, or is it culture that needs to change?
Well, I wouldn't use the word coloured communities. I think that's quite offensive. I wouldn't really use that at all. But I know what you're saying. What I'd say that in Britain, there's been nearly 50 years of campaigning for race equality legislation. The first piece of act was in 1965, which was to stop discrimination, people discriminating in getting accommodation. And then it was amended in 68 to stop discrimination in people doing in a labour market. And then it was then focused on structural racism in terms of government departments and local authorities and other agencies and private businesses discriminating. So we've had a long history and tradition in the UK, but those changes have only come about through lobbying and campaigning. So you need the lobbying and the activists working with the lawmakers and the politicians and concerned individuals as well. I think with Black Lives Matter, just to touch on that very briefly, it's had the massive.
yeah, that was a big thing for the Black Lives Matters when George Floyd died in the hands of the law. And that particular story is very, very, very sad. But also, I feel like I could be very careful how I word this. I just wonder if that exact same thing would happen if it was a white person. I don't know. I really, really, truly don't know. Um, but I feel like if the roles were reversed and I was the one, if it was a white person, like, would all these people be like white lives matter, and if so, would that be racist? uh this is just this is crazy, guys. This is really, really crazy. And if you guys are from the Netherlands and you like this tradition, I am really, really, really sorry that we are tearing it down for you guys.
For impact in Britain, so much so that a number of museums and institutions have now removed statues celebrating people who have benefited from the slave trade, and it's now led to a national debate in Britain. What is Britain, and what aspects of British history should we condone or re-examine at least? So I think it's been an interesting but healthy conversation that we're having. We should have had a very long time ago, to be quite honest.
Mitchell Assayas, in the Netherlands, some schools are voluntarily removing images of blackpete. Some television entertainment shows have already stopped using him, but there's no legislative, constitutional lawmaking going on to try and stop this from happening. Is that part of your strategy as well, to get laws changed?
Can a simple ocean creature be the answer to vision impairment as we age? If you wear glasses or contacts, you must see this. A Nobel Prize winner.
Yes, absolutely. Since the beginning, it's been one of our goals and missions to lobby towards politicians, both locally and nationally, to develop legislation to get rid of all kinds of racial stereotypes, especially Zwarte Piet, Black Pete, of course. However, unfortunately, politicians have been not taking responsibility. The Prime Minister, for example, has repeatedly said that it's not his responsibility, it should be the responsibility of society. And that's a very disappointing position. But the positive thing indeed is that we do see a lot of change happening in schools, in cultural institutions and companies. So
well, of course,
we do see some progression, but on a political level, unfortunately, those who have the authority have not taken their responsibility.
Tracy, I'm just going to come to you in a second, but I do want to pick up on something Mitchell just said. In effect, then, what is more important to you? What is more important to you? Is it cultural change, then, or is it legal change?
Well, I think both are very important. And I think with the All Black Lives Matter movement, we have to understand that fighting racism is not a trend. For people who live in Western society, they face racism every day. That's the first thing. The second thing, I think the change of mentality is the most important thing. So we can have laws, we can change laws, we can make resolution, but if people don't change, don't act differently against people of color, against Black people, we will still have racism. Therefore, it is still important to go in dialogues, talk with people, and teach them about history, teach them about racism, and teach them about the impact of racism on Black people, because a lot of people don't understand that facing racism is a traumatic experience. I think that's important.
Mitchell Assayas, one of the bigger problems you've got when it comes to changing law.
I feel like it would be really hard. I'm sure we are. If there's any racism going on, this is making it worse. You know? I'm really anxious to see what everybody has to say about this. Also, I want to do a poll on people that live in the Netherlands and whether they think it is racist or not racist. So I will actually be doing this after this video and putting it on my community tab for you guys to be able to vote. So that would be really cool. And also, if you guys are enjoying the content, please hit that like button and subscribe as well so you don't miss out on any more content. I really, really, really appreciate it. And hopefully I can get better and better.
You touched on it earlier when you were talking about politicians, is actually in Europe, there is this rise of the far right. There are politicians who may not be far right, but are certainly listening to their constituencies and suggesting that actually if we do something about blackpete, we are going to anger a number of our constituents who don't see this as being racist. So you have a political problem here as well, don't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that is the main reason why politicians have not taken responsibility. Again, I have to refer to the Prime Minister of the quote-unquote Liberal Party. He has acknowledged, especially after the Black Lives Matter uprising of this summer, that indeed blackpete needs to change. However, because he knows that a large part of his political base is quite conservative, he's afraid to take the steps to actually, develop legislation to abolish it. So yeah, that's a big challenge.
See, all that looks fun. All of that looks fun. There was something I was gonna say. That's why I paused it. But it's totally disappeared.
Patrick Vernon in London. Is there any way of this becoming a much more international movement? Are people in the UK and America interested in this idea of blackpete as a cultural stereotype that needs to go? Or is this very much focused on the Netherlands, do you think? It's not really a global issue?
It's a global issue because wherever you are, we have our equivalent of blackpetes. So obviously blackpete is steeped obviously in the history of Netherlands, but in Britain we have our similar blackpetes in terms of racial stereotype and negativity. It's very similar to America as well, but it's still the same issue. The same issue is a process of dehumanizing us, that we're seen as an object or the other. We're not respected and valued as human beings, and therefore it becomes fair game to belittle us and to defend and to hide behind inverted commas traditions to justify racist propaganda as well. And actually, if we want to change people's hearts and minds, it does require having this dialogue and a conversation. I mean, it's very sad to hear that in the Netherlands that politicians don't want to address this issue because they're worried about their voter base and staying in power. But if we can educate a new generation of people from Holland and in Belgium that blackpete is racist, blackpete is actually dehumanizes the black experience, and actually more importantly it justifies even to a certain extent your white privilege. I think that's a battle we need to have for the next generation, whilst at the same time still campaigning as well. We have these same issues in Britain, and even though we've got probably the best legislation in Europe as we leave Europe, or sadly in the next few days or end of the year, we've still got the best legislation around fighting discrimination. There is still a massive level of discrimination, and there's still stereotypes of black people.
Patrick, sorry to cut you short there, but I do want to bring in, we are running out of time, Tracy Bibo-Tansia. One of the questions I always wonder about is, has blackpete had an impact in Kinshasa in regards to people you speak to? Is it a thing they're aware of? Is it something that they know about?
Well, if you know Congo, there are so many issues here that blackpete is one of the least of their issues. But when you talk with Congolese people about that, they don't understand. And of course, they also see it as racism. Even old colonial, like white Belgian that lived in Congo for a while and then go back to Belgium and see blackpete, think that's weird and wrong. So yes, it's not the main issue. But talking about colonization and decolonization, is not only a Western subject, it's also an African subject, and indeed a Congolese subject.
I want to thank all our guests, Mitch Lesayas, Tracy Bibo-Tansia and Patrick Vernon. And I want to thank you too as well for watching. Now you can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, Al Jazeera.
Yeah, so that's that. So another message or comment that I have on here, somebody said, Saint Nicholas was a saint who freed slaves during that era. Didn't he give them independence, and some chose to help him give food to children and free more slaves from camps back then. So the fact that the feast, which is hold right now, is turning to such a media debacle is just wrong. Besides the fact that the people who demonstrate mess up with the fun for children, I recommend watching a more positive and less clouded perception. Perception. You are right, Soul Decides. That is very true. I should be watching something a little bit more positive. There was another one. It says, somebody said, Zorp isn't blackface. It's very much a different thing. There's a few that I've seen on here that I thought was just really, really interesting. No, I'm not seeing it. Somebody said, nobody in this video did explain how blackface worsens racism or turns the Dutch people more racist than other countries. It seems that someone is trying to divert everyone's attention. Oops, I hit the wrong one. From what racism actually is about. True. Very, very true. Then somebody said they can make it all they want. But for me, Black Pete is someone who's black because of the chimney. That is what I was told when I was little. You could rub it off if you wash properly, but Black Pete is lazy. That was what we were told. Never ever was sad to us Black Pete is a slave. I find it very disturbing that people try to interpret the tradition as something else, as it was meant to. People who have no connection with my country at all. So unless you yourself thinks like a racist and makes this about color, then it becomes something that it is not, okay? But for me, it's just the dust from the chimney, nothing more or less. That's very, very true. And thank you, Reese, for that comment right there. So guys, I do read your comments, so please leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I appreciate every single one of you. Have a really good day, guys. Bye.